How's it going, everyone? It's Riley's Red Zone, and welcome to the playoffs. So we're just about to begin in the NFL this week with the playoff bracket, and in today's video, I'm going to be predicting what I think will be the outcome of every single game for the NFL playoffs and who will be the Super Bowl champion. So thank you so much for all the support throughout the entire season on the weekly NFL picks during the regular season, but now it's time for the playoffs. So I'm looking forward to predicting what I think will occur, and obviously when one step goes wrong, the whole thing could be, but you never know. Maybe I'm just going to nail every single one of these. So we're just going to have fun talking football really in today's episode. So before diving into the playoffs, let's quick recap how it went for me this season in the regular season, as I went 172 and 100 as my final record, and we had 20 guest pickers throughout the season. So I went 11-5 last week, which gave me my usual and gave me that final record. But when it came to the guest picks, we had 20 of them throughout the season. And in the end, it was Pierce who was the top ball knower. It came down to the final game. If the Vikings had won it, Danny would have been on top. But instead, Pierce was our guest pick champion for 2024. If you yourself want to be included next year, just let me know in the comments below, or feel free to reach out via social media or however that we can get you involved next year for guest picks. We had 20 this year, and you never know. We're just looking to step it up in the future as well. But that's how the regular season went. But back to the playoffs. This is a great lineup of games for both sides of the bracket. I really feel like the teams in here, almost all of them, have a serious chance that if they get on a hot run, can really go crazy and win the Super Bowl. But with that said, we're just going to dive into the AFC first. We're going to take it a piece at a time here. Let's start on the AFC. We're going to go with the figurative biggest difference in games being the Bills and the Broncos, the 2 seed versus the 7 seed to start. The Broncos, they were floundering towards the end of the season, but managed to actually get a win in the last week when they needed to against a backup Chiefs team that allowed them to make it to the playoffs. And the Broncos were one of those teams where even if the Bengals had somehow made it in, I felt like the Broncos are a top 7 team in the AFC by the end of the season, and Bo Nix is on a heater right now when it comes to playing quarterback for Denver. But overall, I think that they are glad that they got in, just barely. The Bills have been playing really, really well. It sounds like Amari Cooper is just still dealing with a personal issue. I don't know if that's going to do anything, but I'm going to assume he's good to go. And so with that, this game, to me, the Bills, on paper, I just can't pick against them. They've been great this season. Josh Allen has been on fire, and he's doing it with a cast of characters maybe not as strong as some of the other top teams in this AFC. So I'm going to go with the Bills in the first round matchup. I think that this could be interesting with Bo Nix, but I have to take Buffalo at home to move on to the divisional round. As we flip to the Steelers and the Ravens, how about this one? The Steelers are not playing like a top 7 team in the AFC right now, and they are thankful to be in. They're playing their usual game of start fast and then kind of slowly disappear as the season goes on. Russell Wilson has been all right, but maybe not elite. Meanwhile, they're facing off against a team with Lamar Jackson, an MVP candidate who is electric. And they can also run the ball with Derrick Henry. They have been phenomenal. Zay Flowers did get hurt in the last game against the Browns. I don't know if that is also going to play into account here. Either way, it would take a kind of huge jolt back from the Steelers, in my opinion, to really get back on the right side of things. I just think that they're not, they're another first-round exit this year, but you never know. Maybe they could squeak out one win. But I like the Ravens. They're building up a lot of momentum, and I think they're better than what their record shows. They are playing better than a 3 seed right now when it really comes down to it. So I'm going to go with Baltimore on there. And then the phenomenal matchup between the Texans and the Chargers. This might be my favorite matchup, honestly, in the wild card round for me, because the Texans, going into the year, they were really smart. They have a quarterback after his rookie year, phenomenal, CJ Stroud. So you have that rookie contract that now we can put all our chips in. Our window has opened. We can go ahead and put a lot of chips on the table to go win the Super Bowl. Go get a Joe Mixon. Go get a Stephon Diggs. Go get a Danielle Hunter on the defensive side of the ball. But honestly, I've been a little just slightly underwhelmed. They haven't been quite as great as I thought they would be this season. Now, a game changer here is they did beat the Titans last week in great fashion, but the Titans are not great. The X factor to me in the playoffs, which is something that I could see being magical, is the CJ Stroud to Nico Collins connection. Those two have a chemistry that is up there with the likes of Mahomes and Kelsey, that they just can make these off-platform late, they are on the run, CJ Stroud scrambling, and they can connect downfield. That's a huge weapon to have right now in the playoffs, especially when it comes to being in the clutch. But they're playing against a Chargers team who is red hot to me, that Justin Herbert woke up and he is dealing right now with Ladd McConkey. They can run the football when they want to as well. I know it's been health concerns, obviously, with J.K. Dobbins, but when he's in there, they've been electric, and I still have some belief in Gus Edwards, and now they just signed Ezekiel Elliott to the practice squad. I don't know if that's going to really do anything, but they have options at the running back position. So I think that they're gaining momentum at the right time, and so this is going to be my first upset, at least seeding-wise, in the bracket here, which is going to be the Chargers getting a victory over the Texans. So they will move on to the divisional round. That's how I see the AFC Wild Card round playing out. So that moves us to the NFC after going through those games, where we're going to start with the Eagles and the Packers. This was a very close game at the beginning of the season that was played in Brazil, but these two teams are completely different since then. Let's start with the Eagles. I'm going to say this off the bat. So, Saquon Barkley had a phenomenal season. They save him up. Don't have him go get the record. Instead, they want him healthy for the playoffs. So, you know they're going to lean on him. I just have to put this straight up. Jalen Hurts is still in concussion protocol at the moment I'm recording this. If he's good to go, then you're good to go. I think Jalen Hurts, you need him here. Don't get me wrong, Tanner McKee has kind of actually played well over the last few weeks. He could be an interesting long-term project for somebody, but let's assume Jalen Hurts is healthy and he's good to go. I like Philadelphia here against a Packers team who just kind of slowed down at the end of the season. They didn't get any momentum going into the playoffs. This is a team that I thought going into the year could be a divisional round type of team. They could pull off the win here against the Eagles. I don't think the Eagles are unstoppable whatsoever. But on paper, with Jordan Love being at least okay this year, Josh Jacobs is great running the ball. The receivers, now Christian Watson is cooked. He's hurt again. I just have to go with the Eagles, and that's, of course, assuming Jalen Hurts is healthy. I'm going to pick Philadelphia here, but I think that there's a higher chance the Packers upset the Eagles than the Broncos upset the Bills when it comes to those 2 versus 7 games in the playoffs. But let's go to the Bucs and the Commanders. This is going to be a fun matchup. Honestly, the pound for pound, this could be maybe one of the best games. I just think it's going to be a fun one. You get 2 quarterbacks that maybe aren't in the top MVP discussion, like top 3, but they are maybe in the top 5 red-hot quarterbacks right now. Jaden Daniels for the Commanders and Baker Mayfield for the Bucs. It was awesome to see Mike Evans get that incentive and the team really rally behind him. I think that's honestly something that they can use moving forward into the playoffs, as they're going to be at home as well. But the Commanders are playing really, really well this year. Jaden Daniels may be a rookie, but he is legit. And I think obviously he's kind of the version of what we saw CJ Stroud last year, where Washington's probably going to put a lot of chips on the table next year now that they know we got our guy at quarterback. And so this matchup on paper, I think, is going to be fun. Baker Mayfield can sling the football for the Bucs. But I feel a little bit better about the Commanders' roster overall and the playoff experience. I'm going to take Washington in an upset here in the wild card round, at least seeding-wise, again, to get a victory as the 6th seed to move on to the divisional round over the Buccaneers. I have Washington in that game, but that should be a great game to watch. And that brings us to one of the most anticipated matchups, the Rams versus the Vikings. This game has all you could ask for. We have a Rams team who on paper, roster-wise, looked lackluster defensively going into this season, but they've been playing really well. Their offense, when they have everybody healthy, which they rested everyone in the last week, so they have them healthy, has been great with their core four, if you want to call it, of Stafford, Kyron Williams, Cooper Kupp, and Puka Nacua. Those four have really just gelled, and you can count on them any day of the week. The Vikings, obviously, were on such a huge win streak, and then it gets shut down by the Lions. There's no way to sugarcoat that game. That game was terrible for Minnesota. I think both were outcoached, as well as obviously Sam Darnold played his probably, and I don't think it's close, worst game as a Viking. And as someone that has grown up and known the Vikings very well, in constant communication with people about them, here's my thoughts on Minnesota when it comes to Sam Darnold here. The question really is, if you take a look at Sam Darnold's sample size in Minnesota, you'd classify that game right there as an outlier. That was a fluke game from him in a bad way. But if you take a look at his whole career, then it looks a little bit more normal, and it makes those other 16 games for the Minnesota look like outliers above. The truth is, I think we're going to see an in-between type of Sam Darnold for the playoffs. I think that, I don't know if he's going to magically, there just was something off there. I'm not going to write him off. If I do have time in the offseason, we get time to discuss some of the quarterback contract situations like Darnold, Brock Purdy. I'm looking forward to that. I have an opinion on that, that I think going into last week would have been a little less controversial, but now I think after that game, people will see on the side of, maybe Sam Darnold's not the guy. I don't think that the last game tells everything about Sam Darnold. And what I think is interesting, as long as just because I'm familiar with the Vikings here, the Vikings have been so fascinating that with the national media, everyone kind of doubted them for this early part of the season, even when they're winning, because it's like they're Minnesota. They're going to lose again. They get to 14-2, and all of a sudden everyone hops on the train, and it's how can we deny that this team has 14 wins and they're back there? And I'm assuming going right back into this week, it's going to completely flip again, and everyone's going to hop off the bus. The truth is the whole time it's somewhere in the middle, and you just got to do that. I'm predicting a bounce back fashion here from Minnesota. Now, I know that the two losses the Vikings had earlier this season was a loss to Detroit and then a loss to the Rams. That is crazy. The two next to each other, and now it's the potential to do it again. That'd be crazy if the Vikings were 14-0 against everybody not named the Rams and the Lions. But I think we get a bounce back here from Sam Darnold. I think that the Vikings will be prepared. Kevin O'Connell versus his former team. They're going to bounce back pretty well, in my opinion. So I'm going to take Minnesota as the 5 seed to go to the divisional round in the NFC. So that brings us to the divisional round, where let's start with the AFC side, where we're going to discuss the matchup between the Chargers and the Chiefs is what would occur here. So another matchup for these squads that they're familiar with each other, a division round matchup. And, let's just say this straight up. It's hard to beat a team multiple times, and Kansas City would need to do this against the Chargers. But I think you'll see, but I don't think this Chiefs team is as strong as they have been over the last few years, but they're still very, very good. And you can't rule out Mahomes in the playoffs here. The Chargers are really interesting that I just want to see long-term what their ceiling is, because in a world of, it just feels like the AFC is so much more locked down with the quarterbacks of Mahomes, Jackson, and Allen. How can you squeak above that if you're these other teams? I mean, it's ridiculous. And so can Justin Herbert and the Chargers ever have a window? We'll see. With Jim Harbaugh, I certainly think there's a chance. It's hard to beat a team that many times, but I am going to go with the Chiefs here just because I think they have more experience in the playoffs. I'm not going to write them off that much, even though I'm a little bit more hesitant compared to usual. They're the 1 seed for a reason. Yeah, they had a lot of plays that went their way during the season, but in the end, if you win that many games, there is at least some type of skill to it. And so I'm going to go with the Chiefs to hold their ground as the 1st seed in that matchup, which brings us to the other matchup in the AFC, which would be absolute cinema. And in my opinion, this would be a great AFC Championship. I think these are the 2 best teams in the AFC, the Ravens and the Bills. So only having to pick one here is brutal. If you are a longtime viewer of the channel, you'd be familiar that back in the early 2020s, there was a run where I picked the Bills to win the Super Bowl about 3 videos in a row. It was a preseason video, 2 straight playoff prediction videos, and they just haven't done it. This feels a little different. Like they could actually have potential this year. But Lamar Jackson and this Ravens team, to me, has a little bit more playoff pure experience. And I think just like Josh Allen and the Bills, this is a team that has been really waiting to take that next step up. And I think this year could be the year. Their defense has really picked it up, and Zach Orr has done a phenomenal job on the defensive side of the ball. With Derrick Henry this season, I think a lot of people doubted him going into the year at the age he is. He has been spectacular, and to have that element of combo with him and Lamar Jackson, you don't know who's going to have the football, and not only can they run it, but Lamar Jackson has been phenomenal passing the football this year. The MVP discussion is a whole different thing, and that's another topic for another day. But when it comes to just as a team winning this football game, give me Baltimore as the 3 seed to move on to the AFC Championship, which would give us a Ravens-Chiefs AFC Championship. We'll talk about that as we get there, but let's flip to the NFC side divisional round. Where with a couple of those seeding upsets, it sets us up for Washington at Detroit and Minnesota at Philadelphia. So Washington at Detroit, the Lions. Yes, they're banged up, but they went from, after they lost to the Bills, kind of sliding to me to like we thought maybe they would be pretty easily the 5 seed at that point. Like they would slide to the 3rd because of the injuries. They're back on top. They are legit. I mean, Alex Anzalone was a huge addition back for them. They're playing really well. They're going to get David Montgomery back with that much rest. I just think that Detroit is a wagon this year, that they are legit, and they're going to be hard to stop. Washington is a great story with Jaden Daniels. As I mentioned, I have him getting to the 2nd round of the playoffs, which as a rookie quarterback is impressive. But on paper, I can't pick against the Lions here. So at home, I'm going to take the Lions then and go with Detroit in that one to move on to the NFC Championship, where they made it last year. But that brings us to Minnesota and Philadelphia. They get home field advantage here, and it's hard to win in Philadelphia in the playoffs. They have had so many runs with different quarterbacks because they are a legit team there. In the Vikings, here's the thing with the Vikings. I just as easily can see them making another run and winning 3 or 4 games in a row as I could see them getting bounced in the 1st round. I really think they could even go the distance, which is crazy after that loss against the Lions. But this team is strong enough on both sides of the ball that their defense plays well enough. If they can just get the Vikings offense that they had for 15 of the 17 games or so that they had, besides a couple kind of stinkers, they could seriously make a huge run here. But with what we know, I think that I'm just going to meet in the middle, and maybe that's not swinging for a home run on getting this whole bracket right, but I think maybe we're just going to see an in-between version of that. And so I'm going to take Philadelphia at home to beat the Vikes in the 2nd round of the playoffs. I just would seem a little crazy if I pick the Vikings to move much further than that, even though I think that their potential actually still is stronger than some of the other teams that would make it that far in the playoffs. So that brings us to the championship round. Let's start on the AFC side. we get the Chiefs and the Ravens. This would be a great matchup to watch. Bring it back to that first game of the season, which came down to just a toe tap touchdown would have been for the Ravens. I talked about it. I think the Chiefs are great. They are the 1 seed for a reason. You can't count out Mahomes and Kelsey, but I just don't feel quite as sure as I do compared to the previous years. And when you flip to the Ravens side, there's got to be doubts with we haven't seen Lamar make a Super Bowl with Baltimore. We haven't seen that. But I think that they're gaining momentum at the right time. And as I talked about earlier, they're playing great on both sides of the ball. I think that their offense is actually more consistent and difficult to stop. So I'm going to take the Ravens as the 3 seed to make the Super Bowl on the AFC side over the Chiefs, as that sets them up for a championship appearance in the Super Bowl. And they're going to play the winner of the NFC side, which is going to be between the Lions and the Eagles. Lions at home with a home field advantage. The Eagles are very, very good. With Saquon this year, they can run the football. Their roster maybe has a higher floor, but I also just see a little bit more bust potential from Philadelphia. Compared to the Lions right now, look like they are wheeling and dealing. Here's the thing with Detroit. Their offense, obviously with Ben Johnson, he's going to get so many coaching requests because he's so creative. And they are on fire offensively right now, and I don't see why it would slow down. But Aaron Glenn, I already before the Vikings game was thinking he's going to be a head coach somewhere, and I will talk about that in a separate video. I think I'm going to make a coaching video perhaps if I have time. They stepped up, and that defense is legit. With all of their Band-Aids they have, they are strong. It's worthy. I'm not quite sure what the Terrion Arnold injury was at corner for them. That maybe looked not great, but either way, they're going to make it work. I think the Lions are maybe the most dominant team that we've seen this regular season, and so I'm going to take Detroit over Philadelphia at home to move to their first ever Super Bowl appearance in the Super Bowl era. So that would be something to see. So that sets us up. The big game, Detroit versus Baltimore. The Ravens, back in New Orleans, where they last won it in, the last decade or so, a little more than that. Playing against a team who's never been in the Super Bowl, but would be the hottest team in the league by far at that point. Here, let's break down the matchup. We get the Lions, whose offense has been spectacular. Jared Goff does have Super Bowl experience, albeit in a loss against the Patriots, but he's been there. The Ravens have not, with Lamar Jackson, been to the Super Bowl. So that's a new game for him, but having a coach who's been there, done that, I think is a game changer. And as well, we need to give all credit to Dan Campbell for absolutely turning this team around. I think at this point he's probably coach of the year. He is spectacular. And one of the biggest reasons that they are winning as much as they do is their modern style aggressiveness when it comes to going for it, when it comes to just making these decisions. That is one of the biggest strengths they have as a team, and it's one of the reasons that they're so dominant. But sometimes I just think it's reckless more than it is aggressive. And so I could see something turning out there where something goes wrong when it comes to making a call, but it's worked so well for them all year. So I can't really assume that. The Lions' defense against the Ravens' offense, to me, is where I think the question comes in. I think that the Lions' defense with Aaron Glenn has maybe played better than this Ravens defense, but I like the Ravens defense against the Lions offense more than I do the Lions defense against the Ravens offense. I believe that with the Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry combo on offense that I've talked about this video, the Ravens feel a little special this year. And even when they started slipping in the standings, I still had them as a top 5 team because I truly think they are Super Bowl contenders. This would be heartbreaking for Lions fans that you get into your first Super Bowl and you're going to have to wait again. But I have Baltimore. The Baltimore Ravens going the distance and winning the Super Bowl this season. I believe it would be a phenomenal matchup. This would be one of the best Super Bowls on paper that I could ask for a matchup, because we're either going to see a Lions team get their first ever championship, or we'll see Lamar Jackson and this modern Ravens team get their first Super Bowl with Derrick Henry there. I'd love to know your thoughts on how it will go, but it is going to be a fun playoff, no doubt about it. I mean, once again, as I said at the way beginning of the video, you can make a case for any one of the 14 teams to go the distance, and I love that about this season's playoffs. So that's going to do it for this video. I'll be hopefully back with more content this offseason than last offseason. We'll try to work it in there, but it's been a pleasure throughout the entire season to bring you weekly NFL picks, as mentioned at the beginning. If you do want to be involved next year with the weekly NFL picks, planning on bringing that back, just comment down below, and comment down below who you think wins the Super Bowl. It's going to be very, very fun to see who comes out on top. So that'll do it for this video and the 2024 NFL season predictions for the entire year that it was. And so long for now. I'm going to sign off. It's Riley's Red Zone, and I'll see you in the next one.